Hi and welcome to this week's channeling session. It's going to be a little bit different today than what I normally do. I'm crazy busy in my business at the moment, and so I didn't have an opportunity to record this week's wisdom channeling, which I post on YouTube for everybody to see. So I woke up this morning wondering, how am I going to take care of the situation, because I really just don't have the time to do it. And the universe sent me an angel, and that angel came in the form of Tracy, who I did a private reading for, I think maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And she sent me an email, totally unsolicited. I didn't even ask. She just sent me an email saying that if you would like to use my private session, meaning hers, to share with the audience, meaning you guys, you're very welcome to do so. And so that's what we're doing today. So thank you, Tracy, so much. You really saved me here, and thank you to the one and the perfection of life that it worked out so perfectly like this. Tracy's questions were a little bit different to what I normally get. Normally people ask things specifically about themselves, whereas Tracy asked more about how to secure her wealth, how to transfer into the digital new financial paradigm, moving out of the old one, and how to do that while being aware that the people who have been controlling and manipulating finances for so long are now trying to find their way into the digital crypto world so they can have the same type of control there. So how do you sort of reconcile those two things? It was something we haven't done before, so it was very challenging. Also at the end, or towards the end of the channeling, my guys decided they wanted to offer some information which Tracy didn't even ask, and that was about her parents and also about her son, her grandson, and the situations that she's facing there. So you may find it interesting. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Greetings, Tracy. Thank you for bringing to us this new challenge of a type. During this phase of transition, what is valuable is going to be redefined. And so, as long as individuals hang on to the old paradigm of what value is, or what holds value, then they are going to be blindsided when the definitions reform. And what was once considered to be valuable loses a great deal of its value. And then other items which were once considered to be commodities of a type, which didn't have any intrinsic value in themselves other than just the domestic convenience, are going to become considerably more valuable. And so this transition will diversify so that what is valuable becomes not only what is a valuable store of your wealth, but also what is valuable from the perspective of survival. And we are speaking specifically about ensuring that you have the resources which could see you through a transitional phase that precluded access to the things that you need on a daily, regular basis to sustain yourself. So this would include primarily food and water, and more so food than water, because water, depending on your location, can be freely given by the earth itself, whereas food is more difficult to attain. It doesn't fall from the sky. And therefore, one of the previous commodities which really didn't have no value, weren't seen in that way, but just were a convenience of sort of daily sustenance, is literally going to become an asset of significant value. Your consideration should be to place value, and by value we mean to convert your wealth into forms which are going to be protected or going to be insulated or inoculated from the collapse of these old systems. And also, it is important that you establish a stockpile of these commodities from the past, which will become more difficult to acquire. So, if you haven't already, then we recommend that you begin warehousing food, that you begin building an inventory of the various nutrients you would need to sustain yourself if they became difficult to attain. And as you are aware, there is a concerted effort to ensure that this is the most likely outcome. Team Dark, as you like to call them, are manipulating the global food network and delivery system and so on to bring about a global famine which has no precedent. And when it becomes apparent to the greater bulk of your societies that this is an impending disaster, at that point it will be too late to make the decision to start building up a reservoir of food. So, you are requesting this information so that you can be ahead of the curve, that you can be on the frontier and have the insight which gives you an early warning. So this is our early warning to you. We strongly recommend that you begin building some reservoirs of these types of resources which are literally necessary to sustain the avatar on a daily basis. Also, it is important that you develop some type of strategy for storing these resources. Because if you just have it in your kitchen, in your cupboards, in your fridge, then you are vulnerable to people who are desperate, and also the government who wishes to claim your resources and redistribute them. So, we recommend part of your strategy is that you be inventive in the way that you store your foods. You store these resources. So whether it is in your roof space, or it is buried, or whatever way you feel is most appropriate for the opportunity that you have available to you. So, it is not our wish or desire to alarm you or any that listen to our message. But there comes a point where one has to be very practical and very prepared if they are going to make this transition with the least amount of suffering which is possible for you. We do not predict the future, but what we are able to do is join the dots and also sense the energy which is building, which is on the horizon, which is making its way into the current moment for humanity. And from that information, we can extrapolate the most likely outcomes. So, the point that we are making right now is we see that there is a likelihood there is going to be these types of challenges in regards to food, in regard to security, in regards to accommodation. But these are not set in stone. It is an extrapolation of the available information. So it is still possible at this time that this may be averted. And so humanity is able to come to some form of resolution, some form of cooperation and awakening, such that what is available is used and is utilized in a way which minimizes the suffering for all, rather than large bulk of humanity suffering while a smaller part of humanity is fully indulgent in the resources they have available to themselves, as if it was the most abundant period in all of humanity rather than the scarcest. Yet, as you can imagine, that outcome is less likely than the outcome we have been discussing, which we suspect you also can see on the horizon, where there are going to be these shortages, and therefore it is important you think and act strategically beginning now. Regarding the store of wealth, cryptos, how to manage your wealth and finances during this transitional phase. Absolutely, you do not or wouldn't be served to keep your wealth in the fiat system with the fractional lending, where the money which is put into circulation is borrowed from the central banking system. This system was created to eventually fail. That was always the intention. And the point at which it failed was going to be one of the most rewarding moments in the generational history of those that were responsible for creating the system, because they would be able to, which they have done periodically throughout the time they've had this stranglehold on the global financial markets, to asset strip, to collapse the personal wealth of many millions and billions of people, and then come in with their limitless wealth and asset strip as much as they can to accumulate as much of the hard work, sweat and tears of the average people of the world for pennies on the dollar, to plunder. So, it would not be wise to be part of this system when this transition comes about. And also, if one is not prepared for this transition, then it's much more likely that they would have very little choice other than to step into the next paradigm which these dark forces have in mind. And this next paradigm will be a system of total and utter control, where your every transaction is controlled and can be vetoed. In the context of global famine and wealth wiped out, many will have no choice, if they wish to continue to survive, to continue to have access to what they need to sustain themselves and their families, the children. They will, by extortion in a sense, be forced into this new system where they will become slaves. Financially, socially, and in thought. They will not be free anymore. And this will be the beginnings of the crowning of this vision which Team Dark have had for a very long time. For them, this is the Super Bowl. And all that they have worked towards over many generations will have come to fruition, because they will be the masters of a slave system from which there is no escape, because escape will be synonymous with death. Yet, it has not come to be, and we still hold great hope and expectation that this final vision of the cabal will never come to be, because a point has been reached where the awakening of humanity is now outpacing the consolidation of the wealth, power and authority of this cabal. And the awakening of humanity will reach a degree of development that it will literally mute or stop in its tracks the marching of humanity surreptitiously under the guise of benevolence, under the guise of protecting the climate, under the guise of equality and so on, to this dystopian end vision of the cabal. So, although the cabal can see this is occurring, they can see this is on the horizon, so they are, as much as they can, trying to put in stops or infiltrate, corrupt, derail all of these burgeoning new systems and tendencies of the awakening humanity, including crypto. And while Bitcoin, for example, is decentralized, these dark forces, Team Dark, own such significant amounts of coins such as Bitcoin that they can act in unison and literally direct the entire market. So although it is not centralized, they can act in a way as a board of directors and cause the market to work in a way which depletes the wealth of the individual. However, even though they wield this type of power, it is still not possible for them to use it as comprehensively as a tool of manipulation, as a tool of exploitation, extortion, as they have been able to with the fiat system. So, it is still worthwhile to be part of these systems. But if you feel that there is an uneasiness with participating in these coins, such as Bitcoin, such as Ethereum, then it is our recommendation that you always honor your inner feeling. So if you have an intuitive sense, if you have a feeling which nags on you. And you have the wakefulness to appreciate that it isn't just the paranoia of the mind, but it feels like it's coming from a deeper place, and that it is something which is worthy of trusting, then we recommend that you diversify your holdings. So rather than have everything in these major coins, which will be the primary focus of the dark forces, because they are the primary reservoirs of the wealth which they wish to transfer to themselves. They present the greatest opportunity for them to steal what isn't theirs, what they have not earned, which they do not deserve, but they feel entitled to have, because they consider themselves a superior form of life. And as such, what is yours is deservedly theirs. So, the types of coins or currencies within this crypto paradigm which we suggest that you consider are the ones which allow you to be completely anonymous. So, you can be a participant within that marketplace, and yet no one would know that it is you. No one would be able to intercept what you are doing. No one would be able to limit what you can transact. No one would be able to step in and then do some form of forensic analysis to determine what your transactional history has been and what degree of wealth that you possess, and therefore will not be able to make the announcement that you owe them, that part of what you consider to be yours is really due to be transferred to them. So, there are several of these blockchain coins which are specifically designed to be entirely untraceable, but to be entirely anonymous. And this is what we perceive to be the most secure holding of your assets within this digital paradigm. And of those, we would recommend that you consider the coins which are most popular, which have at this time, have the widest adoption. So there will be a much higher probability that if the transactional system breaks down and you are put into a position where you wish to trade your digital assets for commodities, for food, for security, for housing, for power, that the holding you have is acceptable in the transaction and can literally be used in that way. So, we have coins at top of mind, but we are reluctant to make specific recommendations regarding this, because we would prefer that you listen to our words and then from what we are saying, you then go and do your own research such that you can make the connection and you can see which assets we are inferring, because what you discover through your own research is a very close match to what we are describing. This is the mechanism by which we prefer you would discover. And therefore, you will have a greater depth of understanding of that which you are investing into, and also you will have a greater sense of responsibility for the decision that you make. So, developing this questioning, this inquiry about how it is most pertinent for you to hold your wealth when you move it increasingly out of the old fiat fractional lending system. So digital assets will be a part of the human paradigm going forward. And it is under challenge. So the global governance is trying to derail this natural evolution of the human concept of wealth and distribution of wealth and transaction into a centralized system of digital currency, which is entirely under the control of the forces which humanity is attempting to escape. But that should not be the only consideration. It is sensible also to move some of your investments, some of your wealth into tangible assets. So these tangible assets, which we alluded to at the beginning of this transmission, will include food. Food will be absolutely essential for you to navigate the chaos which we extrapolate is the most, or one of the most likely outcomes. And in that new paradigm, if you have an abundance of food, then this will be a very valuable and powerful transactional currency. Also, the other tangible assets which we see as being a viable thing to hold is silver and, to a lesser extent, gold. Silver has historically been suppressed in price. The very early metal currency was primarily silver-based, yet as silver itself became more valuable, then the wealth which individuals held within a society increased, even though they had not gathered more, they had not exchanged more for their toil. Literally, their holdings was increasing in value. And this was a threat to the governance, to the elite, because the populace were becoming greater in purchasing power as a direct result of the increase in the value of the material that the currency was made from. And so the elite, the governors, were forced to suppress and manipulate the value of that particular substance, which was silver. And now, many hundreds of years later, this paradigm of suppressing the value of silver persists. Silver has never gotten out from underneath this suppression, which now spans many generations. But it is inevitable that at some point, this system of suppression will fall away. Those that are orchestrating it will lose their ability to do so. And silver will then, for the first time, be able to move into an expression of its actual value. And those that are holding silver will experience a many-fold increase in the value of their holdings of silver. So, this is something which we also recommend that you hold. But keep in mind that if you hold silver, silver will be one of the very last things to get out from underneath the suppression. Because if it occurs and silver is able to break free, it will be decimating so many of the large institutions and elitist control systems. So it will be something that they will try to keep under control until the very end. So it may be some time before silver actually does get to break free. But if you hold silver, when it breaks free, then you will be very rewarded. If you're going to use silver as a transactional currency, then it would be wise or useful to hold the silver in the form of coins, in the form of a small amount such that you can make transactions which are less than an entire ingot. So for example, if you wish to go to a supplier of food and you wanted to buy enough food for a single month, you may find that an ingot is enough to buy food for an entire year, because silver will be so much more valuable than it is now. This is a possible scenario only. We are not suggesting this is exactly how it will go down. So, under those circumstances, you may find that it is much more convenient to hold a coin. But the reluctance for purchasing coins is that the silver per unit of weight will be more expensive. So you'll be paying a premium to receive the silver in the form of coins. Yet, when you are in that scenario, the premium that you paid to be in the possession of coins will seem to have been well worth the extra expense. During this transitional phase, when there is an increase in chaos and a breaking down of these old systems, which must occur, for humanity to build new systems, the old systems must collapse. And in this interim phase, when there is the collapse, before there is the full realization of the new systems which will replace it, there is going to be chaos. But this is chaos which has been manifested by humanity as a whole. Even though much of the misery which is experienced on your planet is as a direct result of the cabal of darkness. Nonetheless, the cabal of darkness are part of the humanity being. And it is not an accident that they act in a way which is so dark, which is so nefarious. Because this is the gauntlet of darkness. This is the polaric force which literally will push the bulk of humanity into the light, such that it can make this full awakening transition into the next paradigm, into the next harmonic of what it means to be a human being. So, from that context, what is occurring now, this impending chaos, is a group manifestation. It is a manifestation of the humanity being. This is what you are all bringing about, even though when we bring it down to a level where we can see individuals, it seems as though there is a great victimization, a great exploitation which is occurring by the cabal of darkness on the greater bulk of humanity. And within that context, yes, that is exactly what is happening. But when you take a step back and you look from the outside into the earth-human paradigm, what we observe is the machinations of a single being, the group being, the humanity being, awakening itself. One portion of itself acts with darkness so that it may awaken the greater portion of itself. And this greater portion of itself can transition into a state of realization of what it truly is, meaning it is the awakening of itself. It is the awakening of the humanity being. So, when this chaos does occur, to what degree, we at this point cannot be entirely sure. But we can say with confidence that there is going to be descent into greater chaos than you're experiencing today. So, one of the intangible assets which will be very valuable to you will be community. It is important that you are close to and in communication and in a state of agreement, on the same page, on the same wavelength, with other individuals who upon you can rely and who they can see in you someone that they also can rely. So when there is the hardship, you can come together and form a unity of your own, a community where you can supplement each other. So you can provide to them which you cannot provide to yourself. You can provide to them which they cannot provide to themselves, and vice versa. They can provide to you the supplement which you are lacking in your own paradigm. This will be very important. And this is a return to what it has meant to be human for the most of humanity's history. Humanity's existence was very community oriented. But through the nefarious engineering, this sense of community has been deliberately disrupted, has been deliberately broken down. When this chaos does unfold, to whatever degree that it does, the old ways of being human are going to increase in their relevance, because it will be a return to the organic human. And this will include community, living with virtue, relying and cooperating with the earth, and forming philosophical agreements where each individual is permitted to be themselves and speak freely of their ideas, if that can be done without direct harm to another. And direct harm to another does not mean that words are violence, as is thrown around as a justification for silencing truth or for silencing free speech. But instead, we add that little caveat that it does not do harm to others, meaning that it is not an incitement to hurt others, which is not justified, which is purely for the enjoyment of malice. So, this discussion of community is going to be a good segue into this final part of the information that you provided, which was these new human paradigms, this new way of humanity navigating its reality, where it has taken back the control systems and then it is shared in a sense of liberal, or shared in a sense of liberty for all, rather than under the yoke of this centralized authoritarian elite. In what way can you be part of that? In what way can you contribute, offer service to this development, this building of these new ways? If you are in a community, then this will be the in point for you to become part of these new systems. Because when the community begins to cooperate within itself, and it forms a groupness, or a group being in a sense, because all of you will become linked energetically. This will be a smaller representation of what will eventually become widespread across the entire earth. So it will begin with small communities behaving in a way which is in service to each other. This will be a microcosm of what will eventually become the concept of the humanity being. And so within these communities, there will be agreement and recognition that there are systems which are necessary such that the entire community can flourish. And when it is realized that these systems must be put in place, must be designed, must be operated, must be maintained, then there is going to be a need for who is going to be those that participate in this way, that fill these roles. And so there will be ample opportunity for you to volunteer to be part of these systems. And so we sense that you will find you will fall into it. It will land in your lap as it has in the past. Because this is the manifestation paradigm that you carry with you. And therefore, you will come into a space where you are part of a community, and these new paradigms are under consideration, and then the decisions are made internally through cooperation that there is going to be the implementation of these ideas to build these new systems, to build these new infrastructures on a smaller scale within the single community. And you will be approached. You will be recognized as somebody that has the energetic characteristics, the abilities, the mindset, the auric field, the energetic presence that would be highly suitable to a particular role. And then when you are offered this role, which will be done intuitively, so you will recognize that the person that offered you, the person that recognized that you would be good for this job, is very intuitive themselves. And we're able to make a very succinct connection between the particular role and you as a holistic person, who you are energetically. And they can see there is a close match. And you will recognize it also, and that will be your opportunity to accept and then step into that role and then become a being of service to the new human paradigm. And then this creates the opportunity that as cooperation begins between communities, and your community is able to look and recognize there are systems in these other communities which would be useful to you also, and other communities will recognize that there are systems in your own community which will be useful to them, and then you will be given the next opportunity to be ambassadorial, to go to other communities and help them to establish these new paradigms, these new systems, which you are playing a central role in within your own community. And you will be able to follow this as far as is possible for you. Meaning as far as you would want to go, as far as your health and age permit, and so on. But within that context, within the paradigm of what is possible for you, you will be able to exploit those opportunities to the fullest extent that you wish. Regarding your son and your grandson, this is not something that you asked us specifically. However, we would like to provide some commentary on this. Because in a way, it does have a relationship to what is ahead. So, this is what we are perceiving. The mother of your grandson is, as you said, so off the tracks. And she's angry, she's bitter, and she has a tendency to place blame where it isn't deserved, because by doing so, it exonerates her of responsibility, of introspection into herself. But as she matures, and also as the greater society goes through these significant changes, she will be presented with a situation where she will begin to understand that it would be in her best interests, and also in the best interests of her child, your grandchild, your son's son, that she reconnect with him. Not reconnect as in reform a relationship, but instead to go to him as a potential source of somebody that can help her, or somebody that can give her some guidance, give her some resources, and in return, she will recognize the goodness that she is blind to within your son, and make the decision that it would be good for her son to have a relationship with this man, his father, your son. So, one of the important understandings to take from this descent into chaos is that it won't all be bad. There will be many wonderful and grand things which arise as a result of the chaos. And one of the most prevalent across the planet will be those who are estranged will be drawn closer together, will be forced to reconcile, because the realization will be that no longer can individuals exist entirely as isolated individuals. Because when existing in that way, one is very reliant on the system, because everything comes from the system, whether it is from welfare or whether it is from the occupation. It is still very much coming from the system. Yet if the system collapses and one does not have a network, then they will not survive. They will struggle very much indeed. So it will not take long for most, but not all, to recognize the importance and the value of having a network. And so then they will look about themselves and they will look for who is important in my life and who was important in my life before. Who could I heal my relationships with? So that those that were close but are now distant can become close again. And so it is, from our perspective, quite possible that she will recognize that her isolation in a collapsing system isn't wise, and she will reach out to your son so that there can be some type of reconciliation, and she can be a beneficiary of that reconciliation. And if your brother chooses to behave humanely, he will forgive and he will reconcile. And he will let spite go. And even though she may not deserve it from a certain perspective because of the way that she's behaved, forgive her nonetheless. So there can be healing, there can be reconciliation, and there can be a reinforcing of the network. And through this mechanism, it is quite possible that your son and also you will once again have the opportunity to be part of the life of that precious child. When this does come about, keep in mind that initially it may be with some unexpected difficulty, because his mother is very bitter and places a lot of blame on the conditions of her own life on those around her, including your son and you. And so that energy, that mindset is conveyed to your grandson when she speaks about that part of the family, meaning you and your son. So your grandchild, to a degree, has been influenced to have a bitterness, an anger, a coldness of his own, because he is young and he, as all good children do, listens to his parents and to a large degree accepts what they say. And this is why it's important, if this opportunity does come again into your life, that both you and your son, specifically your son, can let go of the bitterness, to hold no spite, no grudge, and to fully embrace this reconciliation. Because that softness, that openness, that depth of loving energy will be very, very, very conducive to your grandson releasing those untrue concepts about who you and your son are, as portrayed by his mother. Your mother and your father are present. They are there, they are observing, and we are just wondering if there is something they would like to say. Your mother is very proud of you, and she admires your spunk. She admires your tenacity. What is the word? She admires that you live voraciously. She admires that you are a very alive person and you beam into the world like a joyous veracity, a type of energy which she admires greatly. And she always did admire that about you. Your ability to live independently and spend your moments, mostly, not always, you have your down moments, but You are voracious about life. You are excited to be alive. And this is something that your mother admires about you, and she just wishes to say that she is proud of you, and she wants you to understand how valuable that is, to have that energy where it is very easy for you to feel excited and joyous and happy about your life. Your father is here, but he does not wish to speak because he feels he is undeserved to speak. He feels that he squandered his opportunity to be a father, and he carries shame. He carries shame that he had such an opportunity with a wife and a daughter with whom he could have formed an amazing bond, to have an amazing life, steeped in love and joy and appreciation of each other. And yet he was so self-absorbed that he totally didn't recognize the opportunity was there. And his self-absorption was because he was unable to deal with himself. He was unable to understand who he was. So even though he grew to adulthood and he was the man of the house, he never really understood how to be that man, how to fulfill that role. And his sense of doubt was so penetrating that it crippled him. And he sought solace in alcohol, because the alcohol could numb him to the truth that he believed, or he numbed him to what he believed to be true about himself. He believed that he was worthless. He believed that he was useless. He believed that he barely deserved to be alive. And therefore, to escape that pain, which he believed was the truth of himself, which of course it is not, he chose alcohol instead of finding healing within the opportunity which was ahead of, which was right there with him, which was you and your mother. He could have healed himself with love and self-understanding, which came through the relationships he shared with you and your mother. So, while we can take that meaning from him, he is not speaking to you specifically because he feels too ashamed and therefore undeserving to speak to you directly. But perhaps if we coax him a little, understand that your father no longer exists as your father, but instead has returned to the energetic state from which he originated into the life cycle which you know him as. However, when he reconnects with that identity from the higher self aspect, he does it through the lens of the Akashic records. And the Akashic records are all his thoughts, actions, words, so on, of that particular incarnation. And so it is coloured in that way, through that lens of shame. So what we are going to do is we are going to ask him to take a step back and then communicate from the higher self aspect rather than through that lens. So from the higher self aspect, still utilizing the Akashic records, but rather than going through the thickest part of the lens, going through the periphery of the lens, where there is a slight flavoring of that particular identity without being crippled by that identity, because your father was crippled by his identity. Who he believed himself to be was crippling. And therefore, that is why it is very difficult at this moment in this transmission for him to communicate with you when he reconnects with that identity, because it was so dysfunctional. So that it is relevant to the relationship he had with you and who you knew him as in your lifetime, he's going to, for lack of a better metaphor, peer through or pass through the periphery of the lens, where there's a slight flavoring, a slight tinting of what comes through in the flavor of your father. And so he says, there were many times during your childhood when he looked at you and he had the urge to pick you up, or to put you on his knee, or to say that he loved you, or to play with you, or to do many wonderful things with you. And yet he never acted on the impulse, or very, very rarely, because he always felt that he would mess it up. He felt that if he was to form a close relationship with you, that his inner poison would destroy you, that his inner poison would contaminate you. And he didn't want you to be as crippled as he was. And so he felt that he was doing you a service by remaining so distant and giving his time to these other parts of his life which were completely unrelated to you. And he understands that was a very unwise and twisted way to see the world. But that lens itself was warped. His identity was highly dysfunctional and pathological. So, he wants you to understand his distance, his decision to not be a part of your life, even though he was your father, was motivated to a large degree by his love for you, because he felt he didn't deserve, he was unqualified, and that he, even to the point that he would literally be dangerous, and you would have a less happy existence of your own if he was to allow his contamination, his toxification to seep into you. And hearing this is a revelation to some degree for your mother, because this is not something that she appreciated. She didn't understand. She had assumed to some degree that your father had been very distant from you because you were born a girl and not a boy. And so your mother carried with her a sense of guilt that she had given birth to a daughter instead of a son, because in some parts she believed that if you had have been a boy instead of a girl, then the bonding in the family would have been stronger, because her husband, your father, would have been more focused on this nuclear family. And so she felt in some way responsible and guilty. And this created an inner conflict within her because she loved you and she understood this is a very unfair notion because you did not choose to be born. You did not choose who you are. Not from the context of this avatar identity which you occupy now. From the high self aspect, yes, you didn't choose it because it's a free will paradigm. But this created a conflict within her. So she loved you dearly, but she kind of felt in a way that you were a mistake. And the mistake not being who you are as a person, but a mistake in that you weren't born the type of child which would have been most appealing to her husband so that he would have been a better father and the whole family would have functioned more healthily. But understand, even though that may be hurtful for you to hear, this was the mind of a woman who was clutching at straws to try to make sense of her world, to try and come up with concepts, with rationalizations which could explain the misery that she experienced in her own life. And that was one of the rationalizations which she held, which could not be unproven, and therefore it persisted. So, but both of your parents wish you to know they have great love for you and great admiration about who you have become, especially given the challenges that you faced in the way that you were parented. And the place where you were born, this place in Phoenix, Arizona, where it was nowhere near your family's lives, your parents' lives, and you weren't raised there, and you haven't been back there, but you were born there. Why is this so? You were born there because at that time there was an energetic significance. There was an energetic compatibility. And one of the reasons that you have been so resilient as an individual into your adult life, despite the experiences, the childhood that you had, and the type of father that you had, and the type of relationship your parents had, the reason that you've had the resilience to become the person you are now is in some way related to the place in which you were born. By being born there, you were endowed, in a sense, with an energetic quality which has given you resilience. And this was not coincidental. It was by coordination. It was by coordination of the higher self aspects of you and both your parents that your birth would take place there. And that was going to give you some degree of inoculation or insulation from the energetic paradigm of your family unit, so that you could take from that experience that which you need to continue your experiential evolution across incarnations without being so impacted that it crippled you and this entire lifetime was written off. Because that potential did exist in that paradigm. And that's why it was essential, or was important, that you were born in that location such that you were endowed with an energetic quality which inoculated you from being completely decimated from that family unit paradigm. And this is the voraciousness for life that your mother admires you so much for. That quality literally has been enhanced, endowed upon you by the location of your birth. But it's not actually accurate to say it's endowed upon you, because it all exists within you. It's all part of your potential. But you could say that it was amplified. The resonance of that particular set of conditions and circumstances under which you were born actually increased the vibration of that part of your energetic signature. And so it has remained a predominant quality of who you are. And it has given you the strength and resilience to be who you have become. And this is why you find that relationships don't agree with you. Because one of the artifacts of this energetic quality, and perhaps you could even say it is a con if you would like to be married, is that it makes you very individualistic. It gives you a strength which negates any reliance on others. It negates a feeling which you have to be dependent on others. So, going forward, when you move into this community paradigm, be aware this is part of your energetic tendency because of the conditions of your birth. That you have a tendency to feel like, I can do it myself. I don't need others. I can get this done by myself. Okay? So, just be mindful that is how you feel because of those conditions. But when this new paradigm starts to take shape, it's important that you're part of a community. So you're going to have to manage that energetic part of yourself and allow yourself to be humble enough to settle into a community structure where you are not able to shine as the beacon of greater brilliance than others, of greater radiance than others, because this is what you're used to. You're used to shining more than those around you. And that sets you apart, which is what you enjoy. You enjoy to be set apart in that way. But you'll have to manage that so that you can integrate into a community where you become part of the larger organism rather than separate from it, shining brightly. So, this reconciliation is going to be maintaining both of those qualities. Integration into the larger, and also, at the same time, shining brightly, but in a way which is conducive to that dynamic. So, we shall leave it there. There is no more that we wish to add at this time. So we hope that the information which has been transmitted is useful to you. It was a challenging question for us. This first part of the channel, you will have noticed it was a little more stunted than the second half. Once we started channeling on your relationships, on your energies, it was an easier flow for us because this is what we're used to doing. And as a result, we appreciate the challenge that you presented to us by asking us questions which have a more real-world, practical application, had more pragmatism about the literal machinations of your life such that you can maintain your wholesomeness, your integrity as a human being during this transition of chaos. So, thank you very much, Tracy. It has been our pleasure. And know that You are loved by your parents. You are loved by us. You are loved by the earth, and that you hold a resonance which makes you very appealing energetically to those around you. And if you are willing to integrate into a community and in a way sacrifice the individualism which you have enjoyed so much throughout your life, then your transition through chaos can be done smoothly and even with great joy. Thank you, and we love you.